And now it's reported that the Philadelphia 76ers, who have also been in the news in their own right for similar yet different types of problems, are apparently not interested in Kyrie Irving whatsoever. Amid all this trade buzz surrounding an Irving for Ben Simmons swap, at the moment, the Philadelphia 76ers have said at this moment in time, we're not interested whatsoever. So here's what we do know. What we know from this situation is that Ben Simmons has actually returned to the 76ers' facility. He had to return yesterday. He got a COVID test that's mandated by the NBA upon your return. So we know, even though he doesn't want to be there, and he's made those intentions very clear, he did return back to the facility to get tested. And obviously this encounter and this greeting, because his representation with Rich Paul has met with 76ers brass, his return is going to be very awkward, and it will likely be an untenable situation because of the toxicity that will be in the air between Ben Simmons and Embiid and Doc Rivers and the entire roster. But at the end of the day, in the short term, he's back with 76ers brass. So that's number one. The second thing we know is that Kyrie Irving isn't eligible to play for the Brooklyn Nets, and the Nets have come out and said so. They said that yesterday. They announced that Irving is not going to be playing or practicing at all until he is deemed eligible to play, aka until he gets vaccinated and is permitted under New York's local mandate. So we know, and first of all, that was the absolute best action, the best course of action for the Brooklyn Nets to take. It was the only course of action at this moment that was appropriate, because at the end of the day, KD and James Harden had to sign off on this, and it was a joint agreement. They reached a joint conclusion. Hey, we need to think long-term. What's in the best interest of the Brooklyn Nets? This is the best interest. This is the best move. And at the end of the day, the Nets don't revolve around Kyrie Irving. The Nets are bigger than Kyrie Irving. The universe's axis doesn't revolve around Kyrie Irving. And so to ask the 15 other guys on the roster who've already made sacrifices to now accommodate this man even more, that's just unfair. It's not right. Just because Kyrie Irving has applied self-induced restrictions on what he's allowed to do doesn't mean that the other 15 players have to oblige. And so I understand. That made perfect sense for the Brooklyn Nets to say, hey, listen, you're either all in or you're all out. We can't have this half in, half out committed thing. That's number two. Number three that we know is that there were reports that came out of Kyrie Irving's camp that stated that if he was traded, he would threaten to retire, basically quashing any, if not all, potential trades. And obviously, if you're an opposing team, you don't want to trade away valuable assets to acquire a guy in Kyrie Irving who's disinterested at the moment in playing basketball. There's no need to kind of beset your franchise with additional problems if you don't feel like the guy's even going to be playing. So those are the three things that we know. But the reason why, and not to mention, I don't even know if you're the Brooklyn Nets, you may even have to trade Kyrie and assets to someone just for them to take him. And even then, I don't know if that's going to be enough. But the reason why the news in particular with the Philadelphia 76ers and their disinterest in Kyrie Irving is extremely, extremely crucial here and is really substantial is because when we think about what were potentially some of the viable destinations for Kyrie Irving that he would maybe reluctantly be willing to be traded to, well, the Philadelphia 76ers may have been the only option because they've got a disgruntled star and the Nets have a mercurial and equivocal basketball genius who right now is disinterested in playing and being a part of the team. And so if you're Kyrie Irving, you're saying to yourself, okay, if God forbid, worst case scenario, I'm traded to the Philadelphia 76ers, well, Philly is still a major contender in the East. They've got Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, that young core, Doc Rivers. There are worse places to go. I think he would obviously begrudge the move, but I don't think he would be saying to himself, if he woke up tomorrow in a Philadelphia 76ers uniform, this is a terrible situation. I'm not going to win here. I'm going to retire. I don't see that. I could see that with some other teams. If he was traded back to the Cavs, traded to other more, for lack of a better term, destitute types of NBA destinations at the moment. But the Philadelphia 76ers were a viable destination for Kyrie Irving, where I think he'd be willing, he would reluctantly do it, but I think he'd be willing to play and not retire if he was traded to the Philadelphia 76ers. So if Philly isn't all of a sudden recusing themselves from the situation at all, from a potential trade, well, that really crimps the Nets' options moving forward. Really crimps their options moving forward. So again, I still believe that probably in the 11th hour, Kyrie Irving will ultimately get vaccinated. I mean, I think it's very selfish what he's doing right now, not just to his organization, but his teammates and his friends in Kevin Durant and KD. That's not what they signed up for. And he's really doing a big disservice to them. And again, maybe it's wishful thinking on my part. Maybe it's just false hope as a basketball fan that I hope he plays, because not to mention the Brooklyn Nets were the odds-on favorite to win the NBA title this year. Again, assuming the entire core was kept in place. But if Kyrie Irving ultimately decides to maintain this stance and not play, it'll be a slap in the face to KD, a slap in the face to James Harden, his organization, his teammates, everyone involved. Joe Tsai, the governing body, came out yesterday in a report by The Athletic that said he was very displeased with Kyrie Irving's 2-week sabbatical last season in the middle of nowhere for no reason. So it's not obviously frustrating. It's extremely disappointing. And quite frankly, it's probably really irritating and frustrating for KD and James Harden. And Steve Nash has been pretty vocal, and his body language has said the story. So now there was an anonymous quote from an anonymous source yesterday from that same article in The Athletic that said that apparently Kyrie Irving's position is, it's not that he's anti-vaccine, it's more so he wants to be a voice for the voiceless and stand with those that have lost their jobs due to a vaccine mandate being enforced upon them. He's fighting for the plight of others, yet isn't saying anything. He wants to be a voice for the voiceless, but he's not willing to say anything. The irony is that if Kyrie Irving really wants to be more outspoken about this, the NBA's platform is a much greater platform than him being by himself and trying to talk about this stuff. And the other irony is that he was the one that orchestrated this whole move between him and KD joining, between he and KD joining the Brooklyn Nets and having these goals of winning an NBA championship together. And he might be the sole reason why they may not be able to win a championship, because of his refusal and unwillingness to get vaccinated. And so he might have to endure the consequences of that, and people will probably blame him and castigate him, and they might even call it poetic justice. I hope he plays. He's a basketball genius when he does. He's got to make a decision, but right now, that was a big blow given the fact that the Philadelphia 76ers were a really viable trade destination. And now all of a sudden, they're recusing themselves. So that's a big blow.